Hi, my name is Aaron High, and I'm from Whitney High School in Cerritos, California, and I recently found out that I was accepted to Harvard College. PACP has been a help in my high school career for the last 4 years, and I've been taking their ACT classes, which helped me score 35. I found out that the teachers here are the most outstanding teachers possible, as well as the most genuine counselors ever. Miss Kelly has also been a second mother in my life. She's been helping me ever since I started attending here. And without them, I know that I could never achieve my dream of getting into Harvard College.
Welcome, everybody. If you've been joining us for the past few weeks, thank you for listening to our webinars. We hope to continue this throughout the summer. It's always good to have you here. Today, we're going to be talking about how to make a college list. Now, for some people that follows the random choice pattern of making a decision, but in truth, it should probably take a lot more consideration than that. But the question is, what kind of things should you be considering? Well, let's take a look one by one at the things you should be asking yourself as you make your college list. Okay, so it would be easy to make a college list if there were only 100 to 200 colleges in the US, but in truth, there are over 4,000 colleges in the US, and world over, there are over 40,000 colleges. That's a lot of options, and not all colleges are created equal. So how do we know which colleges we should be putting on a college list that we're going to apply to? And the answer is deceptively simple. It's finding your fit. Just like with clothes, you have to find the right style, the right size. You have to find a match that makes it comfortable and effective for you. But what exactly is fit? So fit can be defined in a few different ways. It means a variety of factors that have to be considered when selecting a college. In a bird's eye view, like we're seeing in the picture here, that would mean considering a college's programs. It would mean considering the location, the cost. Obviously, college is one of the most expensive purchases that people will be making in their lifetimes, so that's certainly a part of it. And then the philosophy, or the vision or mission of the college, is what the college trying to do aligned with what the student is seeking. So these are all the big ideas that we'll be looking at here, and we'll go into a little more granular detail as we go through each one. And if anybody's wondering, that picture there is Bates College in Lewiston, Maine, my hometown. Giving a shout out to my hometown there. All right. So the first thing to consider, and I will say that all these things that I'm suggesting need to be considered are not necessarily in order of importance. When finding a college, people will prioritize one thing over another, and that's really a personal choice. So all the things I'm going to mention should be considerations, but not necessarily in a ranked way. So first and foremost, at least on my list though, is the academic or career focus, the major, if you will. Now, students who know what they want to study in college usually will lean toward colleges that are obviously strong in those majors. For example, if you want to be an engineer, you're not going to go to a school that has a very underdeveloped program for engineering, or where engineering is really an afterthought for the college overall. Or even a school that has a relatively new engineering program, you may not want to be the first one to be a guinea pig for that. You may want to, find a place that is established, that has programs that lead to successful outcomes. You would, in that case, prioritize schools that had higher level, higher ranking, better regarded engineering programs. And the same is true for other disciplines as well. Not every college is good at every single major or academic field. So it does take a little weeding out to figure out which schools make the most sense for which major. Now, some schools are incredibly large and have pretty much every major. And those schools are good for those students who are not really sure what they want to major in. As much as having a major in mind can help focus your decision when applying to a school, not having a major is also cluing you in that you should probably find a school that has a wide range of majors that will allow you to explore during your freshman and sophomore years before you have to declare. So in terms of how to make the list, this is definitely consideration, whether it is you know what you want to major in or have no idea. They will set a direction regardless of which side of that equation you fall on. If you are somebody who is a junior right now or is about to become a senior, either a rising junior or rising senior, and you have a vague sense of what it is you might want to major in, it wouldn't hurt to explore that a little bit more, either by doing some virtual activities to see if it truly is an interest, or taking an assessment like the Myers-Briggs or the Strong Interest Inventory, two tests which essentially help bring some clarity to your preferences and what area you might want to explore. And I say that because when applying to college, sometimes if you know what major you want to apply to, it does make it a bit easier to apply to college. That being said, some majors also make it a little more harrowing in that they are very challenging disciplines in order to get admitted to. Again, engineering comes to mind as one where the numbers that a student has to come with need to be a little bit higher just because the expectations are a bit higher. So all this falls under major or academic or career focus, and that is one of the things that you should be considering when choosing your list, when making your list of colleges. But it's not the only thing. If you chose a school based purely on whether it is solid for a major you're intending, you'll be leaving many other factors out of the equation, which could make for a successful experience. So we're not just going to leave it at the major. We also want to consider prestige. Now, there are 4,000 colleges in the US, and I know from having asked students in the past to name colleges, most students can name about 40, in a good day 50. And they usually correlate pretty strongly to the US News top colleges list. But with 4,000 colleges in the US and people who can name 40, that's 1% of the total. And if we're looking at lists, the top 40 is the top 1% of colleges in America. That doesn't mean those are the only colleges in America or the only colleges that would be a good fit for you. And depending on where you are in terms of your numbers, like GPA and SAT or ACT score, stuff in the top 40 may be a reach or a very distant consideration. So prestige refers to whether or not a school has a history of student success. Are they able to get students from starting point to a bachelor's degree in a reasonable amount of time? And then once those students graduate, are they able to either successfully transition to graduate school or to the workforce? And schools always keep track of this data and make it available so that you can see if this is a college that has a successful record. Any college that does have a successful record, meaning typically getting a bachelor degree in under 5 years and a placement rate in the workforce that is greater than 60%, is one that's probably worth keeping on a list, even if it is not on a top 10 list or top 40 or top 50 or whatever list. That being said, it's hard to gauge where schools are held in public opinion without some sort of measurement. So while I am saying that the lists are not everything, they do have a slight bit of use in that they help us filter out ones that are probably not as reputable colleges. The US News list itself usually goes into the 200s when it comes to ranking schools, but I'll also point out it's not the only list. Let's take a look here. So the most familiar list to most people in the US is the US News and World Report ranking list. It is comes out every fall. The colleges really try to jockey for position to be at the top of this list. Why then are there two other lists I'm putting here, also from wide-ranging resources, that have completely different order and sometimes different colleges within them? Well, that's because while lists are useful to get a general sense of which colleges are worthwhile, there is no way to objectively list colleges because there is a lot of personal preferences that are infused into all of these lists. These are not purely data-driven. Some are based on how guidance counselors rank them, which is, highly subjective. But what you can see, though, is that there are patterns from one list to another. Some schools do hit points on every list, like Princeton at #1 in U.S. News in this past cycle. It's #6 in the Times Higher Education. It's nowhere to be found in the QS World List at all. That doesn't mean it's not as valued on there. It was in the top 20, just not in the top 10. But when we see schools that routinely show up on these lists, we know that there has been more than one filter applied to how we can gauge their effectiveness, their public appeal, their public opinion sense of them. What we're really looking for is then to put lists side by side, and once we find colleges that meet the other criteria that we're shooting for in our college list, we can see if they routinely rate in the top 100 of these different lists. If a school that has the major I want, for example, is on 2 out of these 3 lists in the top 100, I'm fairly confident that not only does it have my major, it's going to be a school that can deliver an education to me that I'm shooting for. So these are the current lists. I will point out there is typically a separate list for liberal arts colleges. They are typically smaller in scale, these schools. They emphasize a broader base of learning in the undergrad process. They are ranked separately, but the same rules apply. If it is on the list somewhere fairly high on more than one list, you're rest assured that it's probably a college that will be able to deliver an educational experience that you want. All right. Beyond the prestige, beyond the ranking, and beyond the major is location. Now, that means 2 different things. First, it means where on planet Earth are you willing to go? For many people I talk to, it's I don't want to leave California. And I get it. The weather is great here, but there's also only so many schools within our little sphere of Southern California. So we often ask students, well, where else would you be willing to go? Where have you been before that you felt comfortable with? And then we kind of use that as a metric to see which regions might be acceptable when picking a school. Some students are wide open and are willing to go anywhere in the world. Some don't want to go more than 10 miles from home. It's a personal preference, but if it's something that is going to be important in making this decision, it is something that needs to be defined relatively early on. Location also means something else. It's not just where in the world, it's also what type of environment. Urban versus suburban versus rural. Some people, for their college experience, want the buzz of the city. They want to know that there's always going to be something to do. In that case, the urban option is probably for them. Some people, especially those who've lived in the suburbs, are kind of comfortable in that suburban setting and are looking for an environment that will just be a continuation of what they've already experienced to date. And then the last type, the rurals, some students want to go to an area where they will be really invested in their academics by not having that many outside distractions, or they'll be majoring in something that typically requires a school to be remote. Agricultural stuff is usually what comes to mind there. So again, defining that preference early on can help establish what schools are appropriate to put on the list. If a student is open to it, doesn't really care where in the world, doesn't really care about the environment, this is less of a consideration. Beyond location, the student body and class size. Now, most students having gone through elementary, middle school, and high school, have never had a class that has had more than 30 or 40 students. And some students who have gone to private schools for most of their lives are probably more familiar with 20 or fewer students per class. That isn't always the case in college. The first few years of college, when you're doing your 101 level classes and your 200 level classes, are sometimes taught in groups of several hundred. I know at one class I had when I was in college, there was, I believe, 700 and something students, and it was taught in a movie theater. That doesn't work for everybody. It's kind of unavoidable at a larger school, but the student should know what type of learner they are. They've had enough experience by this point to know if they're a student who demands constant interaction with the teacher, has a conversation going so that they can understand the material fully, or if a student is one who can kind of just be a part of the group, just kind of blend into the background there and absorb information. But whatever style a student uses, and usually it's somewhere in between those two extremes, it's good to know what that style is that works for you best, so that when looking at colleges, you can see the average class size, you can see the average size of the student body, and know if it is an environment that is overwhelmingly large for you or too small for you. In the past, I've had students who, after going to college, realized they were a different type of person. I had one student who went to Pomona College, which has roughly 1,000 people, if memory serves. And he started, after 1 year, feeling like he knew everybody who was there and didn't really like that. He wanted to kind of expand beyond that. So we helped him transfer to UCLA in the following year. Likewise, I've had students who have gone to UCs or Cal States where they felt they were getting lost in the shuffle and then wanted to go to a school that was a little more intimate. Sometimes you don't realize what your style is until you're at the school, and that's okay too. But if a student has a sense in high school of what their preferences are, it can be part of the decision process when making your college list. So it's beyond the student body and class size, the quality of facilities, which means a few different things. For most students, college is going to be the first time they are living away from home, which means that the living arrangements themselves should be part of the consideration, the dorming. Is it guaranteed for freshmen? Is it not? What do the dorms look like? Are there any special needs that the student has that the living arrangement will have to take into account? All stuff that's available to find out from a variety of sources, which we'll see later, but it's something to consider. Likewise, if a student is going to major in something that requires equipment that is up to date, like computer science, actually most of the STEM fields do require constant updating of machinery to keep things current. If a student is going to lean toward one of those majors, well, then you better make sure that the college you're applying to is one that is devoted to keeping things up to date. You don't want to learn something that is STEM related in college only to find out by the time you graduate that the world has moved significantly beyond what the college offered in terms of their equipment. So by looking at where the schools take their financial resources and reinvest them into the programs, you'll get a sense of what the college prioritizes in terms of its equipment. And lastly, if there are things like, I need to have a gym in my dorm building because I want to work out, also things that can be found out before you apply. If it's important to you, it's worth putting into the consideration pile for making a college list. All right, and then the one that certainly hurts the parents, I suppose, more than the kids is the cost, with a dollar sign for the S just for added emphasis there. College is expensive. Typically, it's second only to the purchase of a house and by means of what a family will be spending most of their income on. That should be then a major factor in choosing a college list. Yes, public schools are typically cheaper than private schools. At least they are if you were to look at the sticker. But in truth, the way that scholarships and financial aid works, sometimes private schools end up being cheaper than public schools. So while cost can be a consideration, weigh it against the idea that you probably won't be paying full price for a private college if that were the case. So in making the college list, be mindful of cost, but don't exclude things out of hand because of cost. You don't know what that final price tag will be, and so it's not worth eliminating a possible school just because you're scared by how much it might run you. If you know your financial situation will put you in a place where financial aid is pretty limited, then yes, maybe the cost will be more of a factor, but then again, there are still scholarships available for a variety of different reasons that could help allay those fears. All right, so beyond cost, the family considerations. What is considered part of family considerations? One that is certainly meaningful for a lot of families is legacy. If somebody in the family went to a college when they were of that age, they have essentially made it a little bit easier for future generations in that same bloodline to go to college as well. A lot of schools have legacy wherein if you are willing to go to the same college your parents went to, they give you a little boost in terms of your admissions chances. If that is going to be something that might catapult you into a college you otherwise might not be able to get into because the numbers aren't quite there, then sure, you can put that as part of it. There might be other family considerations though, like maybe the student is helping take care of somebody at home. Well, if that's the case, and that is to continue through the college years, then obviously don't choose a school that is too far away from home so they can continue doing that. Likewise, sometimes parents have a very set expectation list of colleges that they would want their kids to apply to. That should be a consideration, but it shouldn't really be the only consideration. You know, the student is the one who will have to go through the 4 years of college, not the parents. So while the parents might have a short list of schools they want students to apply to, certainly let the students add their own preferences to that. We don't want to make it solely a mom and dad only list. This is something that everybody has to be on board with. The people have to pay for it, and the one who's going to have to go through the 4 years of education for it. It's a family decision. It should all come together. And then there's a whole slew of other things that could potentially be part of the consideration when applying to college. For many people, they have been participating in extracurricular activities throughout their high school years. Many people want to continue doing these activities. Some students want to try new activities. I've had at least 2 or 3 students in the past few years who have wanted to start playing Quidditch. Not something typically offered at high schools, but many colleges surprisingly do. So that is part of the factor as well. The clubs also include things like professionally oriented groups. So for those students who know what major they want to do in college, they can join a group that will support that interest, a way to talk with their peers about that subject. That also means things like sports. If a student has been playing sports before and is looking to play sports in college, then they can certainly make that part of the consideration. If a student has been playing sports at a very high level in high school, then the sports might become a primary consideration. It might be what gets them into a caliber of school that academically might otherwise be out of their reach. If a student wants to be in a sorority or fraternity, that is a consideration. Not all schools have them. If a student wants to avoid being in a sorority or fraternity, they can make that part of the equation as well. If a student wants to spend a semester anywhere other than the headquarters of the school, most major universities have partnerships with different universities in other countries of the world for different study programs. Looking into those programs, if you know there is a place you would like to go or a place you would like to go to study a specific thing, should make that part of the consideration when you first apply. When you're first making your list, you want to add that to them. Career placement. How does the college help a student when they graduate? What kind of mechanisms do they have in place to get that ever crucial first job or to get an internship? Not all schools' career departments are equal. It's worth looking into just to make sure that the school you're applying to is one that is going to be helpful in the long run. And then lastly, a religious or ethnic focus. Some students who have been raised in a specific denomination of a religious background and are looking to continue that through college and beyond may want to find colleges that are affiliated with their specific religion so that they can kind of weave their way right into it. Equally common is the student who has not had much of a religious background and is hoping to avoid that in college. Lots of private colleges in the US are religiously affiliated, but not all of them. Many are secular as well. If a school is going to have a very religious bent to it, the student should know ahead of time before committing to it if it is something they are also on board with. And likewise, ethnic focuses. Some colleges have vastly different demographic breakdowns depending on who their target audience is. If that is going to be an important factor for a student, then by all means, that should be part of it as well. All these things are part of the consideration. So typically, what I do with students when we're first talking and making these lists is I go one by one through each of these factors, making notes about what both the student finds important and what the parent finds important. And then we work to find a middle ground where both the student's interest and the parent's interest are kind of acknowledged. And we make our list based on that. But I can tell you that considering all these factors, we're still going to have a different issue, which we'll see in a second. So as it says here, I've determined my preferences. How do I find colleges that match them? So there are many different ways that a person who is not sitting in a guidance office can start working to make a college list. So I'm going to share the resources that are generally available to the public, and then it'll at least put you in the right direction to start this process. Starting with, first and foremost, and probably the most used, college search sites. There are way more college search sites than the ones listed here, but these are the ones that have kind of stood the test of time and whose information I have found to be the most useful when I do college searches that require a little more finesse. So first and foremost, the College Board, yes, home of the SAT and the AP, they do have their own college search engine. It does have over 3,700 of the schools in the US, and most of them are represented here. And it also allows you to search by many of the criteria that we just talked about: size of school, major, selectivity, things like that. So for many people, that is a good first place to start. If you put in all your criteria, you'll probably find that there's still over 100 schools that meet the criteria that you've specified. Still, that's less than the 4,000-ish that you had to start with. College Factual is a good place to get data and even to compare colleges side by side. It has a little feature where you can pit them in a battle and see on different metrics who is more in your liking. College Niche, or Niche, is one that has many reviews from students themselves who are at the colleges. So it has just as much as opinion as it has fact on that one. So sometimes it's good to see which way public opinion is flowing on a college through Niche. Ditto for College Confidential, kind of the same idea, and also for College Insight. So with these in search engines and using the criteria mentioned above, you're able to get from the 4,000 colleges to 100 or fewer colleges. But you know what? You're probably not going to apply to 100 colleges. So in a bit, we'll take a look at how to whittle that down a bit more. But there's also more resources than just the college search engines that you should be using in your college search. So beyond what's available online, there's also what has been made to print. In the print world, there are not quite as many resources, but the ones that you can find are updated annually and usually have really reputable and well-researched information. So some of the books that we keep in the office that we use for reference, The Fifth Guide to Colleges. This one is particularly useful because unlike many many guidebooks which will tell you what is great about a college, they will actually say what is not so great. And that's equally important to know when you're making a college list. We don't want everything to be a promotional material trying to hard sell you on a specific college. We want to know, both good and bad so that we can make a measured decision. That's why we like the Fifth Guide and why we use it. We also have Princeton Review in the office, a book that is certainly thick, if nothing else. It is a massive tome. Covers most colleges. There are many different versions of Princeton Review. Some highlight only like their top 300 picks. Some are more inclusive. The one we use is the bigger, more inclusive one. And then the Ultimate Guide to America's Best Colleges. This one, don't use it as much, but is at least another opinion to be offered about the different schools that most students put in their consideration pile. So if the online approach is not for you, or you want a little bit more to work with, picking up one of these guidebooks is not a bad idea. These are all easily available online at different booksellers. But again, it's not the only way that you can find about a college. Right now, many students who are going to be seniors in the fall, or even those who are going to be juniors in the fall, have an opportunity to do virtual college fairs. Typically, college fairs were events held at convention centers, and many booths, each from different universities, would set up house there, and students would go to the schools that they found interesting and get more information and meet the representatives. Well, you can't do that right now, really, but you can do it virtually. There are many virtual college fairs that are popping up. So if you see an opportunity for a virtual college fair and there are one or two schools that you've already heard of that you've been thinking about, this is a good way to learn more about the school. Yes, it might be a little heavier on the promotional side and less on the fully realized picture side, but it's still worth going to these virtual fairs. It's also worth signing up for webinars and information sessions that the colleges are offering themselves specifically. Now that everything has pretty much gone online for the time being, it's a great way to learn about colleges directly from representatives of those colleges without even having to leave your house. The added benefit is if you register for one of these webinars, you are essentially a contact that the school has. And when the colleges down the road ask what kind of contacts you've had with the school, you'll be on record as having done at least a webinar or maybe even a private conversation with a representative from a school. That is a good way to show demonstrated interest, something that is being increasingly looked at in terms of college applications. So well worth doing. Get your name on a list, find out about a school. Hard to beat that. You can also find out about colleges through alumni or alumni of that school. Obviously, people who have gone to a college have a better perspective of the college than those who have not. So if you know somebody who has gone to a college that you are considering, you certainly want to talk to them so that you can get their opinions, what they liked, what they didn't, what was their favorite part. All of that you can find out and get a little more personal insider scope on what's going on. You can also talk to current students at the school too. This is typically easier if in high school you had a friend who was a year or two ahead of you, who went to a college that you yourself are also considering applying. Nothing's to stop you from asking them, the nitty-gritty about how the school works or their experience. Most people are willing to share what they like and dislike about a school. You know, if you have an older brother or sister, obviously, who went to a school you're considering, I'm sure you've already heard stories, but you can ask more pointed questions about what it is that's important to you in regards to the school when you're having a conversation with them. So these are valuable resources. And lastly, certainly not least, are college counselors. So people like me, when we're asked about schools, we've been dealing with admissions departments at those schools. We have students who have gone to those schools who usually keep in touch with us and let us know, you know, what they like and what they dislike. We go visit more schools than most people do. You know, we try to, or I personally try to hit about, 10 schools a year that I haven't done before. Obviously less this year, but we are in the business of understanding what colleges have to offer and then trying to take those things that we've learned about the school and match it to what students are finding valuable about the school. So all of these people are resources. All of them can help you making that college list. So you've done all the research, you've read the books, you've talked to all these people on the list, you have your list of schools, and then you're realizing, okay, I still have 50 colleges on my list. And some simple math says, if I did that, it would cost me $4,000 in application fees and about 300 hours of essay writing. I don't really want to do that. How big should this list be in all practicality? For most people, the list itself should be about 8 to 12 schools. 8 to 12 well-chosen schools, because in making that list, you're going to have to kind of place yourself in the admissions odds pool, meaning my numbers for GPA and SAT are at this level. I have some colleges where the numbers are more, some are about even, and some where I am doing a little higher numbers than what they are used to. Well, that's kind of how we gauge the reach match safety. So a reach school would be one where the mid 50 percentile of standardized test scores, the SAT and the ACT, is above the numbers that you were providing. It also is one where the average GPA is above yours. If those two things you're falling on the lower side of, that school is a reach. Do you want to have 8 to 12 reaches and nothing else on your college list? Of course not, because that's impractical. We want to have some reaches because given the right circumstances, you could get into them, but we also want to cover ourselves and make sure that there will be a college option in case the ones that are reaches don't work out. In some cases, you can think of it as buying a lottery ticket. Yes, you could win the lottery, but you know what? The odds are you won't, so have some other things to do with your money that you can use to make money. So that's our reach pile. 2 or 3, if you're going to be doing 8 schools total, 2 is typically fine. If you're going to be doing 12 schools, you can do 3, sometimes 4, as long as you know that one of your matches or safeties is truly something you're interested in and would be willing to go to if that reach doesn't work out. We like to have the bulk of our options in the match category, where the numbers are about the same as to what they typically accept versus what you're offering. With matches, you still might not get into all of them. You should get into most of them. What we're really doing, though, is we're creating options for the following April when you have to make a decision about which college to go to. We don't want to have a situation where there's only one choice because it was the only one that a student got into. We want to be able to have, from a bunch of different quadrants, a bunch of different priorities represented. We want to make sure there's at least 4 or 5 schools total that are of high interest, so that when the decision comes down the road, it's a good choice, not an only choice. And we also, of course, will have a few safety schools, 2 or 3, depending if we're doing 8 to 12 schools, just to make 100% sure that we have a 4-year college option. That doesn't necessarily mean the student will even go for a 4-year college option. Sometimes a student gets their list of schools, they get their acceptances, and they They still don't want to do it. They want to do something different. They end up going to community college for a few years and trying to figure things out before they reapply to college. It happens. But given the amount of effort and time and money spent in the college application process, if you are determined to go to a four-year school, I would say a careful choosing of this list will guarantee that you will have options available to you. All right, so I got the list. I got my list down to 8 to 12 schools. A little bit more is fine. A little bit fewer is fine, though starting to get dangerous. This is not the era when people could apply to 3 schools and rest assured that they were going to college. But as long as we have, you know, a half dozen to a dozen or more schools available, now is time to actually do the application process. And that's largely where we can come in. So once we have our list of schools, it's a matter of prioritizing. How are we going to approach the application process? What are the dates? Are we going to be doing early decision or early action? Early decision being the binding choice where students are saying to the school, if you take me, I will take you. It's a commitment. It's a commitment. That's what I was looking for. Versus early action, which is essentially just ripping a Band-Aid off more quickly and finding out if a college is going to accept you before the holiday break in December. So if you're going to do a school like that, that is something that needs to be decided. The essays, the topics, how they're going to be presented. There is the main Common App essay for most of the private schools that you'll be applying to. For many people, there's also the UC essays, but there's additionally a whole pile of supplemental essays that need to be tackled. For the average person, that ends up being anywhere in the 15 to 20 range for different essays. So that kind of has to be strategized and timelined and worked into the whole process, as well as doing things like preparing for interviews, getting a portfolio together. All of that comes once you have your list. But it's very common for people to be struggling with that list. If that's the case, well, now it's time probably to talk to somebody who has been working in the college field for a longer period of time. For most people, you know, you go through this experience once when you do it yourself, and then you kind of abandon it. But for people who work in the field, we're always kind of keeping update as to what colleges are offering and where students fit in the grand scheme of things as it relates to college admissions. So if that's you, either way, if it's you're ready to move on to the next step, or you want some help with the college list, by all means, feel free to give us a call and we can help you from there. Okay, so at this point, I haven't even looked at the clock. So at this point, we will go to our Q&A session. So feel free to type in the Q&A box there. You can type in Chinese because I read Chinese. No, I don't, but somebody else who's on the panel probably will be able to translate it for me. So type in whatever language you're comfortable in. We'll see what we can do with it. And while we wait for those questions to come in, I see there's already a couple there. Let us talk about some of the other things that we have at PA College Prep. So there I am in my younger glory in the top left, but I am surrounded by a team that is second to none as far as college counseling goes. We've all been here a number of years. We all love working with students to help them find a path that works for them. And over the weeks, if you've been paying attention, most of these people have popped up in one form or another. So if you have not, feel free to go back to the PA College Prep page and look at past videos for some of the topics you might have missed. And what exactly is it that we do in the counseling department? Well, it kind of depends on which grade you're going to be entering. If you are a 7th through 11th grader, we kind of help put all the pieces together that will be important in the college application process. We try to lay the foundation early so that it isn't a last-minute panic in grade 12 of trying to figure out what it is you have to offer a college on the application. So we help students choosing their courses, you know, not just for the coming year, but we kind of map out the entire high school experience. And then we kind of adjust as variables change, as they often do. But we always are one hand in that one. The GPA, we use this as both a starting point to see where a student is and to strategize how to maximize it over the years. And then at the end to kind of evaluate where the GPA places them in terms of the college admission process. We help plan out standardized tests, be that the SAT, ACT, SAT subject tests, AP tests, you name it. We will help them both choose when the best time to take those tests is, and also which tests they should be taking. You know, at our academy, we also offer SAT and ACT prep, as well as AP and subject test prep. And any student who has a target in mind for both college and score, we are able to kind of guide them along the process of moving them from the score they have to the score they want. So both internally in terms of how we can help students, and then externally, meaning using what the SAT, the College Board, and the ACT has to offer, we can help students get where they need to be. We can also help with extracurricular activity planning. Obviously, extracurricular activities are a big part of the admissions process. Once we get past the numbers part of it, the GPA and the SAT, the students want to know who the student is and what they value and find important and how they spend their time. That's where the extracurricular activities come in. So we help students both in identifying activities that are important and also in kind of working their way through those clubs to find positions of leadership if available. We also do, as mentioned before, personality tests like the Myers-Briggs and Strong Interest Inventory to help students kind of define their points of interest so that we can help explore those and move in that direction if that's what they want. And then we also have, every time we meet with a student, some sort of reflective exercise that helps them define who they are. That's what a large part of the high school experience is for many people, and even the college experience, defining who you are, what's important to you, and how you want to go about your life. For 12th graders, we also have a lot more focused in the college application process. We help students with lists. We help them with the applications and their essays. We help them with money in terms of scholarships, not really so much with FAFSA, but we put people in the right direction for that. You just don't want us in your taxes, trust me. And then interview practicing and strategizing, and then the final college selection, meaning when the results come in April and you have to choose which college to go, we help weigh the pros and cons and offer our opinion on that as well. So that's all the stuff we are doing inside the office. As you saw at the beginning of this session, this is our contact information. Feel free to take a screenshot of that for future reference. Our operators are standing by, I suppose. And yes, we do offer a free 30-minute counseling session to anyone who wants one. So by all means, get in with us and we will put you in the right place. Here's a look at some of our teachers here. You might recognize Mr. Lathrop is also a counselor. He dips in many pools here. He's a jack of all trades. But over the years, we've had very good results with the ACT and SAT. Many students achieving perfect scores or near perfect scores. And that's just over the course of the summer, which is quite frankly not a very long time to be preparing. But if done effectively, it can get you the results that you want to see. So here is what our summer schedules are looking like. And if you're looking at this on an iPhone, I realize you're not seeing too much right now. But all of these things are available on our website. We do cover the full gamut of test prep, be it SAT, ACT, AP, SAT subject tests, or if you're not even that old, we also have classes for elementary and middle school students as well, both English, math, and in the afternoon, some fun stuff as well. My daughter is doing this herself, and she is a big fan. And here are the test dates. These are a moving target at this point this year. New information comes in daily. So while this might be current to the moment, it's always best to check with either the College Board or the ACT or with us to get the most updated information for when test dates are. This is a unconventional year as far as testing goes, but we are getting the information as quickly as we can and trying to reprioritize, redirect as much as possible. Okay, so let's look at some of the questions we have here. First one, where can I learn more about the lingo of college planning? For example, I've run across the term REACH. What does that mean? So as I kind of alluded to earlier, the term REACH means a college whose average admission numbers in terms of standardized test scores and GPA are higher than what the student has. If the student has like a 3.9 weighted GPA, but the college typically has a weighted GPA of its admits at 4.2, okay, that's a bit beyond the numbers that you're providing. Doesn't make it impossible, just means that the odds aren't necessarily in your favor. Likewise, the SAT or ACT, if one of those standardized test scores is not at a metric that they consider their average, then it is going to be a reach for you. And in tying that to the other question about are the SAT and ACT still going to be a part of this equation, the answer is yes. Even though colleges are not requiring it, it doesn't mean that they're not looking at it. And if you have good numbers, they can help. If you have bad numbers, you can probably pretend they never happened and just go with your GPA. But if you're somebody who is going to take the time and prep and have some good SAT or ACT numbers to show a college, by all means, do it. And likewise, consider there are still some schools that will be requiring it. So if you're applying to more than just the UCs, or more than just the UCs and a college that is test optional this year, you should probably still do it just to cover yourself. But REACH does mean a school beyond the numbers you provide. A match is on par with the numbers you have for standardized tests and GPA. And a safety is a school where your numbers exceed the average for admitted students to that school. That means it should be a nearly 80 to 100% chance of your getting admitted based on your numbers. Yeah. Another question here. I'm looking for a college counselor to help with applications. Could you explain how you help seniors? How often does a student get to meet with you, and how many colleges can one student apply to? So we have a few different packages, but our standard package is for 12 colleges. We help the senior apply to 12 colleges. The UCs are one college, at least as far as we're considering it, because they are one application with different checkboxes for the different campuses. We typically also in that have Cal State as a en masse group. So that leaves 10 other schools, either privates or publics from other states, that we help students apply to. When we first meet with seniors, it kind of depends on when they come to us. People join us throughout the year. If they come to us in the spring of their junior year, we typically meet with them monthly. And during those years is when we lay the foundation, meaning helping to determine what the college list will look like, what majors will be applied to, what data points the student has that we can use in the application process. And then as we hit July, that's when we move to our weekly meetings, and we meet with seniors weekly, barring some scheduling issues from the side there, until the student is in college, until they essentially have all their college applications in, and then we touch base with them, periodically until the admissions results come, and then we help them with that final process. So I will say it is monthly, and then weekly, and then monthly, and then done over the course of a year. And we help students with pretty much everything that pertains to college. We are all writers at heart. Every one of us who's a counselor has had significant experience writing. So the essays, which are truly 80% of the process, we do go in pretty great detail about, in terms of choosing what the topics will be, helping to outline, trying to find interesting ways to tell these stories, helping to position essays, because there's a lot of them, so that they paint a full picture of the student. We work on all aspects of the college essays. Obviously, we help with the application itself to make sure everything is being represented in its best possible light. We help students prepare for interviews. We help students decide who to ask for recommendations and how to approach them. We help students with the final decision. Anything that pertains to college, short of, I can't help an art student with their art portfolio. I can only draw stick figures. But I can probably find the person who could help you. Even that, we can connect you with the right person. So if it's relevant, we deal with it. Students can certainly apply to more than the 12 colleges we have in our package. The way we do it is every additional school beyond that is like a surcharge. But for most students, 12 is kind of the magic number anyway. The third one, what extracurricular activities does your counseling help or provide? So because we are affiliated with a private school as well, because we have Pacific Academy in the same building as us, we do have the benefit of having some activities that students who don't go to our school can take part of. One of those is the Pacific Academy Foundation Orchestra, which does a number of different events throughout the year. We do have students who do not attend PA factor into that. We also have trips to other countries that are humanitarian in nature, that are PA centered, but we also have students from outside PA who attend those as well. Largely what we can do, though, if students aren't into those things, we have extensive resources in terms of what activities are offered within the high school, as well as activities that are offered during the summer at different places throughout the country. Our knowing where these things are and how they line up with student interests is one of the values that the counseling program provides. We know what students are trying to achieve. We have a pretty good sense of where all the different programs are from around the country or the state. And we can say, based on what you are trying to achieve, this is the one we're going to target. We then help the student to go through the application process for whatever that program is. And then, the student is off and running to that program. In truth, institutions that specialize in specific camps, like Cosmos, for example, with the UCs, are ultimately going to be more valuable than ones that are provided by an institute that does college counseling primarily and keeps everything in-house. We want the people who are specialists to do those things. We're not going to purport to be STEM experts ourselves, but we know who is, and that's who we're going to connect you with, the people who are. All right. There are so many tests to take. True. Which ones are significant in terms of college applications? Maybe we can go and have one of our other counselors chime in for a bit on this one. Michael, are you there?
I'm here.
There you are. All right.
Yeah.
Why don't you take this one?
Been listening and enjoying. For those of you who don't know, Chris is really just a fount of knowledge. I'm learning from these too, and I'm in this business. But which ones are significant? Really, when we consider the PSAT, there is some value historically, in part because if you do well on the PSAT, and when the kids sign in, they have the option actually of releasing that information. If you score a high PSAT, get a high PSAT score, you'll actually get a response, more substantive response from colleges. They will actually reach out to you with different possibilities. And this is just a way to get kind of better introduction to schools. But the real value is in the SAT, the ACT, and the subject test. But as Chris pointed out, and I think this is really the watchword here, things are changing daily. Virtually all schools will accept the SAT and ACT. Kelly's already talked about this. You really have nothing to lose. You take the test. If you get a good score, it's an extra kind of piece of data that they can use to guide their choice. If you don't have a good score, virtually every school is optional, and you just pass on it. Some schools have dropped the subject requirement tests. Others still require them. That's something that, for example, Chris or I would be doing when we're going through the list. We'll be checking those and looking to see which schools have requirements and which ones don't. in some cases, for example, I don't remember, Chris, we talked about it, I think it was UPenn, but I won't swear to it. But maybe one of the Ivy League schools, if it's not those guys, said that they don't require subject tests. And then they listed exceptions for certain programs. One was the engineering program, and one was a pre-med program. I recently ran across the other day while looking at Princeton University announced their change in their admissions dates. They, I saw, still require SAT and ACT for recruited athletes. So students who are recruited athletes are still required to submit SAT and ACT and other standardized test scores. So they're all still valuable, but it depends a little bit on the school and a little bit on what you're doing. And so that means attention to the school list and maybe you know, working with somebody like us to make sure that you're kind of checking off all those boxes, because it is a lot of information, but you kind of have to look at it school by school now.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So let's keep on trucking through the list here. Thank you for that response. Well done. How can students best prepare to get into top tier colleges, reach schools considering the latest changes to the college application system? And this in part probably referring more to how things have been upended by the COVID-19. So while the GPA has become iffier because many schools have moved to a pass, no pass system for the second semester of this past year, that will have an effect on GPA. And because some schools are going optional, again, it's optional, not looked at, for the testing, where does that other consideration come from then? If two of the big number drivers are not there, what are colleges looking at? Well, the extracurricular activities are certainly going to have some more weight to them. Things like recommendations are going to have more weight to them. There is no one piece that will be the holy grail for how they make decisions. All the pieces that were in play before are still in play. It's just that the weight of them may have shifted to things that have not been quite as affected by the COVID-19. And you might argue that, well, extracurricular activities have been affected by the disruption to school. The truth is many clubs have been able to continue online since things got disrupted. How a student spends their time while at home, whether it is collapsing into a heap on the bed versus doing something active, proactive learning, is going to speak volumes to the type of student that is applying and who the colleges are going to want to accept. Students who are seeing this as an opportunity, not as a burden, are going to rise to the top in the next college admission cycle. The recommendation letters, and I think this came up in a later question too, recommendation letters are probably going to carry a touch more weight this time. If students don't have if colleges don't have the numbers to rely on as heavily with regards to students, they do need to get a sense of the student and how that student performs in context, at least of their school. And they can get that information from the letters of rec, from the people that are asked, especially the ones inside the school. Guidance counselors always have to write letters of rec for students. It's part of the Common App. They're not always too long or meaningful. But I know that this year, I personally will probably be giving more insight into how things progressed over the second semester. We also, as counselors, have to submit a school report, which will tell what your school did during the time that we did distance learning, how it was addressed, and how it affected the grading, the meeting of requirements for each of the courses. It's all going to be laid out pretty plainly. So the colleges will still have a sense from recommendations and the counselor's school report of where the student is performing in context of the school. That's helpful. Teacher recommendations, certainly helpful too. If it's a teacher that you've had for more than one class or over multiple years, they can certainly speak to your character. I'm not going to say that recommendations are going to be the sole driving factor for what who colleges are going to miss this cycle, but yes, we can imagine the weight of them is going to increase, as is the extracurricular activities. Typically, the numbers were the driver. I think they're going to be slightly diminished, not totally, slightly diminished in this cycle, and a few of the other factors are going to rise up a bit. But still, we're looking at that full picture. They still want to review students holistically. It's not an absolute thing based on numbers. It's not an absolute thing based on letters. It's the whole picture. So we just want to make sure that all the elements that are available that you can present are the best they can be. And in doing so, we know we're covered. All right, let's take a look. Which courses and extracurricular activities are recommended to take as preparation for college? Well, that is largely dependent on the student and what they are trying to achieve. One general rule of thumb, though, is that when you are choosing classes for the next year, you should choose classes that are as challenging as you can handle. At the very least, colleges want to see that you didn't take the easy route throughout high school. Colleges like people who are willing to struggle a bit to get what they want, and that usually means taking classes that are typically right on the edge of what is achievable. So if you're in an honors chemistry class, for example, and you manage to get an A in it, should you then AP chemistry it and take it even farther? Sure, that's a possibility. But then again, it might depend on what your long-range plan is in terms of major and college. Nothing is the same for every student. Every single student we have is different. They have different backgrounds, different experiences, and different plans for the future. And that is how, from student to student, we carefully kind of chart what makes sense for this student. So I don't want to really give a blanket answer to what are the right courses. There aren't any. The right answer is what are the courses that are right for me or my student, and that can only be figured out once I know more about the student and the student has a good sense of what they want themselves. So, but that being said, yes, involve yourself in extracurricular activities that are meaningful to you or that reflect interest. Yes, take challenging classes. Beyond that, it's going to have to be tailored a little more specifically to the student. Let's go back to it. When do you suggest a student start taking college prep courses? So we have students who join our program as early as 7th grade. When do we have them start actually taking courses that are college prep focused? Again, it kind of depends on the student. Not all students are created equal. If a student is up to the task, they can certainly start earlier. But again, it's hard to make a blanket statement of this. Whenever the student is ready is the actual answer to that. And that's something that comes from knowing a student and knowing their abilities and knowing their commitment to succeeding in these classes. All right. School and major. Which one should I prioritize when making my decision? Well, it depends. If you know your major, for sure, if you are 100% committed to a major, then major is the driving factor. Like I said earlier, if you know you want to become like a business major, then you're not going to go to a school where the business program is relatively underdeveloped. You're going to go to a school like Babson or maybe Wharton at UPenn. You're going to go to a school where their main focus is that major, so that you are assured that you will be getting the best that that field has to offer. If you are a little less sure about the major, or if you're open because you haven't really settled on something yet, then the school is going to be the more important option. And the school being an option meaning that they have lots of options in terms of majors for you to explore. You wouldn't want to go to a very small school with only 5 possible majors if you don't know what you want to major in. You're going to want to keep possibilities alive by going to a school that has, dozens, if not hundreds of possibilities for you to explore. So if you know the major, major's the driver. If you don't know the major, the school is probably the driver. For most people, it's, again, somewhere in between, whereas they have a pretty good sense of major. They should have some schools that are good in that major, and then some schools on the list that are broader and have other possibilities worth exploring. That way, come April when that decision has to be made, they have many possibilities that they can now weigh. That's really the goal, is having those possibilities come April. All right, how about our next one here? I'm interested in computer game design, engineering, or computer science. My goals are UCLA, USC, and UCI. I heard these majors are getting harder to get in. If that's the case, should I apply for other majors which are easier to get in instead to increase my chance? And is it possible, and how difficult would it be to transfer to CS later? So, school to school, that's obviously going to be a little bit different. Yes, anything computer science or engineering related is more challenging when you apply to college. People who apply to these majors typically are putting up some pretty big numbers as far as GPAs and test scores go. More and more students also have deeper backgrounds in computer science and engineering at an earlier level, meaning they've already had several apps put up on the App Store that have been downloaded tens of thousands of times. We've had students who have had that stuff. But people who are applying to these colleges, a lot of them do have that. And if you don't, you're already kind of at a disadvantage. Doesn't mean it's impossible. You might be the person who has that level of experience already, just makes it difficult. So the idea is, well, what if I did a different major and then switched over once I got there? So for some schools, that is difficult, if nigh impossible, simply because there aren't enough people who transfer out of those programs to really open up spots for you. It is a definite risk in doing that. Whereas it might get you in on a major that is not as competitive, the move to where you wanted to be is no guarantee. So how does one account for this? Well, again, in making the college list, yes, you will have these schools. And when you apply to these schools, they usually ask you to choose two different majors. One of them can be the one you actually want, computer science, but that second one might be something that's a bit softer. But these won't be the only schools you apply to. You're going to have other schools on this list where your first choice major is either more inviting, a little more easier to get into, or it's a school where the computer science is no more difficult than any other major at that school, or is not difficult to transfer into that major. Not every school has as much of a difficulty in transferring to computer science as the UCs do, for example. But the schools on this list, UCLA, USC, UCI, are all relatively difficult to get into those programs, be it as a incoming freshman or as somebody who's switching into them later on. Not impossible, just not likely, but do choose schools beyond that guarantee your major if you are committed to that major. I would like to apply for a pre-med program, but I got a B in my AP Bio. Would that hurt my application? Can I still apply for a biology major? Does getting any grade other than an A exclude you from taking that up as your college major? The answer is no, it doesn't exclude you. At some of the more competitive colleges, it might make it a little harder to get in. They'll probably want to know what the experience of the AP Bio class was so that they have some context for understanding it. But it's not a deal breaker. Very few things in terms of applying to college are deal breakers, meaning one mistake costs you the entirety of it. It's a holistic process. They look at more than just a single grade. They look at everything that you're bringing to the table. If you have this one B in AP Bio, but maybe you had lots of volunteering experience at a hospital or have done research in a lab that is bio-related, I don't think the B is going to have that much of an effect overall. We're looking at many pieces that create a full picture, many pieces of the puzzle, not just one single piece. Yeah? Okay. Because of the unpredictability of college acceptance during these unprecedented times, would it be safer to apply to more colleges compared to normal years? I don't think that's necessary, unless the goal is I'm a person who wants to just blanket apply to the top 10 schools, just because, I'm trying to chase that rank. But in truth, it's still going to be reach schools, match schools, and safety schools. The COVID-19 thing won't change that too much. I can't imagine acceptance rates swinging too wildly, even in light of what's going on. If one is, though, trying to do mostly reach, yes, sure, you can add some more reaches. But as long as you have a reasonable number of matches and safety, I don't really see a need to go too over the top in terms of number of colleges applied to. Choose the list wisely, and it will work for you. That's always been true, and even in this circumstance will be true. My son is an incoming senior. We have been advised the SAT will not be viewed at some colleges for this upcoming year. If this is the case, do you recommend taking the SAT this summer, fall? And again, it's not that they will not be viewed. They will not be required. Some schools have probably chimed in at this point and said, we're not going to look at them. They are still in the minority. We're still looking at most schools saying, yes, we'll look at what you have to send us. Michael, do you want to chime in on this one? This is your kind of area of expertise here.
Yeah, just to reinforce what Kelly said, the only school in the top 20 that is refusing to look at tests is Caltech. They're the only one in the top 20. Everybody else is optional. You already made the point, things are changing. Many of those schools actually were still requiring the essay test as recently as the middle of June. So it's only in the last couple of weeks that we've seen that change. So I would say there's always the possibility that things will change and other schools may change. I mean, you said yourself, it's a fluid situation, but every school, if you look at it, other than Caltech that I know, and maybe I can't remember, did CSU say they're not going to look at SAT? I never did.
I don't remember if it was made optional or not looking, but I thought it was optional.
Yeah, but in any event, they've all said that they will look at it if you'll send it to them. So the bottom line is it's a no lose. If you take the test, you get a good score, it's an extra data point. You don't send them the data and continue on focusing on the other stuff that you've talked about.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. All right, so currently UC schools do not require standard tests such as ACT and SAT anymore. We're still doing that, yes. What would be the impact on UC admissions? How important these tests would be in current UC admissions? So again, they're going to look at them, just not going to require them. If it's a good number, it'll help. If it's a bad number, you don't send it. It just means that they're going to look at the other factors, the courses you've chosen to take, the rigor of the coursework and how you perform. They're going to look at how participatory you've been in life beyond the school. It's everything else gets a little extra shine to it just because this one might get a little dampened.
I'm going to add a little footnote there, yes. Chris. It was really kind of, I glossed over to my talk last week, but the more I think about it, the more interested I am that they said this. So originally in March when they made this decision, they said that they would still consider it for things like program placement and scholarships. When they made the final decision in May, they said something slightly different. They said that schools will still be allowed to use it and they'll be given guidelines. So the way I read that is that the individual schools will have some flexibility in how or how much they want to weight it, which I think is kind of interesting. But they basically said schools will be allowed to, kind of use it or not use it as they want to, and they'll establish some kind of guidelines which don't exist currently, so we can't assess them.
Right.
But that does suggest that at least some schools have expressed some interest or intend to keep it. And so again, even if it has been reduced, and I think that's a fair assessment because of what's going on, it's a no lose. Take the test, get your score, go from there.
Fantastic. Okay, let's press on. My GPA is 4.4 and ACT is 35. If I'm applying to science majors at Yale, Brown, and Stanford, should I do ED or EA? Which one should I do, ED or EA? That is a question that's difficult to answer based solely on numbers because I'm not entirely sure what it is you're trying to achieve. So why would a person do ED or EA at all? Margaret, are you in the room? No. Okay, and I'll answer. Okay. Figure I'll wait. I'll wake you up and have you take one here.
Yeah, I was doing double answering, so.
Got it. All right, so the question is, my GPA is 4.4 and ACT 35. If I'm applying to science majors at Yale, Brown, and Stanford, should I do ED or EA? Which one should I do, ED or EA? I've already said that without knowing more about the student, it's kind of impossible based just on numbers to know what to do. But can you explain briefly the benefits of ED or EA, and maybe at least give a broad answer to this question?
Sure. Okay, so when we think about ED or EA, so let's start with what ED means. So ED means early decision. And so as Chris pointed out earlier, early decision involves committing to a school. So what happens is you tell them, I will go to your school. If you take me, I will go to your school. And this is you are legally bound to attend that school. And you should only apply to one school for early decision. So it should really be that your number one choice, your absolute first choice dream school. Early action, as Chris said earlier, is you just want to rip the Band-Aid off. So basically, you're going to submit this application earlier so that you will be notified much earlier, so that you will be part of the early action pool. You will be compared with other students who submit their application at the same time. So you're not going to be compared with the other people who are going to submit their application for the regular pool. So there is something called restrictive early action, which is similar to ED in the sense that you should really only choose one school. So Yale is going to be one of those schools that's restrictive early action, same with Princeton, Harvard, and Stanford. So those four are examples of restrictive early action. So you should really only choose one. You can do as many early action as you like if you are not doing restrictive early action. So you really need to choose. So if we have a situation just given these numbers for somebody who has a 4.4 or 35, you are kind of, for these top schools, you are kind of what they're looking for in terms of the numbers. So in a sense, it is quite possible that early decision or early action could be an advantage. However, we do want to point out that in, excuse me, in the last few years, early decision and early action have not been it's not been a significant advantage in past years, because so many students are applying at the same time. So many competitive students are applying at the same time. What used to be a larger advantage to lock in a commitment to a school is no longer the case. So if you can certainly apply to an early action school to find out, and you can certainly, if you absolutely know for sure, the key is you absolutely must know for sure that you will go to that school. That's when early decision will be an advantage and a benefit. But if you are in any way unsure about that school, then that's not recommended. So you need to have something beyond those numbers in order to, especially for high ranking schools, you really need to consider who are the people that are recommending you, what kinds of essays you're submitting, and the basic paperwork needs to be there on time. So we have encountered situations where students are rushing to try to get all of their paperwork in. And you need to understand that when they say the deadline is November 1st, that doesn't mean you send your items on November 1st. That means those institutions must receive all of your paperwork by November 1st. So if at any point there is a risk of you not meeting those requirements, then you will not reap the benefits of early decision, restrictive early action, or early action. You will likely just be put into the regular pool.
Thank you. Well done. All right, let's get back to the questions. What are the tests to assess career and major fit? So the ones that we are using currently in-house are the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, which has been around since the 1930s, and also the Strong Interest Inventory. The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator is a test that shows a student's natural leanings, natural preferences on a variety of fronts. The Strong Interest Inventory kind of assesses the different interests that students have picked up through their experiences over the years. So we kind of use both of them and look for a point of intersection or several points of intersection. And within there, we can see careers that might bring satisfaction to the student. It's a good starting point, if nothing else. We don't consider it to be an absolute, you must pursue this, but it helps kind of focus intent in a way that is worth exploring. So that's how we use that. And typically the earlier we can administer to a student, the better off we are, because that gives a longer time for the student to explore it as a possibility before they apply to college. Can you talk about ACA 5? How is it going to affect Asian Americans in the short future? It's too early to tell right now. It has not been implemented yet, so I'm not even going to begin to speculate where this is going to be going. We're keeping our eye on it, obviously, and as new developments come from it, we're going to adjust accordingly for our Asian American clients. Okay, how about the third one? Which grade do the majority of your students sit for SAT or ACT? It's kind of a mixed bag, although I think predominantly they're juniors. Michael, would you agree that most students in your class are juniors or rising seniors?
Yeah, broadly speaking, between the end of the sophomore year and the start of the senior year, you can split it probably either way. The summer between the sophomore and junior year, the summer between the junior and senior year. I have a lot of students that have gone through both. Really, it's never too late, but somewhere between those ranges, you get much earlier, and then you start to have problems with the math and sometimes even the reading, because the reading is aligned closer to, you know, kind of AP junior senior level.
Got it. Sounds good. And yes, typically on the math front for the SAT and ACT, you do want to be through Algebra 2 just to make life easier for yourself. It's a shorter distance to get a good score if you've already been through Algebra 2. And then I heard that because standardized test is optional and GPA is inflated because one of my classes is rec letters. Okay, this is the one I was referring to before. Yes, it's a piece of the puzzle. It's not the most important piece of the puzzle. Every college is going to have its own way to measure the different elements and what they find important. Just because the SAT is not required or ACT is not required, it's still in use. Just because the GPA had one semester where the numbers weren't really presented doesn't mean GPA is not important. You still had 3 semesters at least before that where numbers were there. The rec letters can help add a level of context to those numbers or lack thereof, but they are not going to be the sole piece that drives this. They are one of many things that'll be considered as part of the admissions puzzle. Okay, and it's that. We did it. Wow. Okay. So, no, next slide. There is more. No, that's the same slide. That's, oh, at present, how many states do not require SAT or ACT test in the college admission? Do you mean state schools? So, the best way to find out the current list of schools that have made the SAT and ACT test optional is at a site called fairtest.org. They are the keeper of the list of which schools have gone test optional or test blind. So if you want to know specifically for a state's school system, if they've gone that way, that is the site where you can find out.
And remember, again, it's changing. Literally, University of Utah announced today. They just decided today.
Every day is different here. So, you know, I keep that open in a tab of my browser for reference at all points because, you know, between now and tomorrow, it might change again. How does a student choose which counselor is the best fit? Oh, it's a new ACA question. I'll go back upwards there. How does a student choose which counselor is the best fit? A student doesn't choose which counselor is the best fit. Typically, based on our meeting with the student initially, we have a sense of who the student might best pair with within our office, because obviously we all know the counselors, we all know our personalities, each other's personalities, and once we meet a student, we can say, oh, I see what kind of personality you have. You would be a good fit with this counselor in particular. If it doesn't work out, you know, nobody is going to lock you in for life. If it turns out to be a bad match, we can always change counselors. But by and large, we've been pretty good about finding the right person for the right student. And the top one again, the ACA 5, if it were passed, Asian applicants are limited to a certain percentage of all applicants who get accepted. I'm an Asian student. What should I do to increase my chances of admission? So there's a few things here. It won't be the same for schools outside of California. And really what we're saying with the ACA 5 is we're talking about UCs and Cal States primarily. So if a student is willing to go to schools beyond California, this is not even an issue. Within California, it just means that if you are going to be pursuing a discipline that is already competitive, like engineering, well, now you're going to have to be even more rigorous in your pursuit of it to have a fighting chance. Or give consideration to majors that are not as typically competitive, because then will at least get you in the door. And then depending on what it is you ultimately want to major in, it's possible to transfer into that major. There's a lot of other variables at play here that would have to be considered. Will it limit the total number of Asians overall so that it's population representative? That is the idea. And right now, the number of Asians at UCs and Cal States is greater than the number of Asians population-wise in California. And the goal of this is to try to make it reflect more how things are across the states in terms of population. Does that necessarily mean it's going to be impossible? No, it's just, it might be a little bit harder. But then again, we would want to know more about you and the plan than just that you're an Asian American. You know, that's, again, one piece of who you are, but not all of it. And colleges understand that too. We would want to see the totality of you and how we can make that work in terms of applying to college. Okay. And that's their stuff. I guess I will throw it back to Ms. Kelly now. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Went a little longer than anticipated, but thank you for staying with us. And I'll have Ms. Kelly take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. So next week is July 4th. We will pass 1 week. And then the next week, we will, Dr. Margaret Fajardo will talk about how to write your common application essay. It's the same Saturday on July 11 at 1 p.m. Dr. Margaret also talked about how to write UC essay. We have all the webinar videos posted on our website, pacollegeprep.com, so you can watch all our previous webinars. And thank you very much for joining us. We are looking forward to seeing you again on July 11 at our next webinar. Thank you very much.